Have you ever felt invisible in your own home? Amelia certainly did. For 10 years, she served the Blackwood family like a maid, ignored by her husband and mocked by high society. But at her father-in-law's 75th jubilee, the humiliation went too far. When her husband's mistress walked in and tried to kick Amelia out of the family mansion, everyone expected Amelia to crumble. They didn't expect the family patriarch to step in, and they definitely didn't expect the piece of paper he was holding, a document that proved the person getting kicked out, wasn't Amelia. Stay tuned, because you won't believe who actually owns the Blackwood estate. The morning of the Jubilee broke with a grey, oppressive humidity that clung to the windows of the Blackwood Manor. It was a sprawling Georgian estate in the heart of Connecticut, the kind of house that had terrified Amelia 10 years ago, and truth be told, still terrified her today. But not because of its size. It was the people inside it. Amelia stood in the center of the grand hall, a clipboard pressed against her chest. She was 34, though the dark circles under her eyes and the tension in her shoulders made her look older. She wore a simple grey cardigan and slacks, blending into the muted tones of the wallpaper. This was by design. Her husband, Richard, preferred her to blend in. "The orchids," a sharp voice echoed from the staircase. "I specifically asked for the white phalaenopsis, Amelia. Why am I looking at lilies?" Amelia flinched, turning to see Richard descending the marble stairs. At 40, Richard Blackwood was undeniably handsome, tall, with the sort of jawline that suggested money and a cruelty that suggested he knew how to keep it. He was adjusting the cuffs of a bespoke navy suit, not bothering to look her in the eye. The florist called. "Richard," Amelia said, her voice steady but quiet. There was a supply issue with the importer. The lilies are the Casablanca variety. Arthur loves them. They were his late wife's favorite. Richard stopped on the final step. He finally looked at her, his blue eyes cold and dismissive. "I didn't ask what my father loves. I asked what I ordered. This is the 75th Jubilee. The press will be here. The board of directors will be here. Do you have any idea how much relies on the optics of tonight? It's a birthday party, Richard." "Not a merger," Amelia replied, a rare spark of defiance lighting her chest. Richard laughed, a dry, humorless sound. He closed the distance between them, towering over her. He reached out and tucked a stray lock of her brown hair behind her ear, a gesture that should have been affectionate but felt possessive and demeaning. "Everything is a merger, Amelia. That is why you are still struggling. You think small. You think about sentiment. I think about legacy." He dropped his hand and checked his Rolex. "Is the catering staff prepped? I don't want a repeat of Christmas." "They are setting up in the West Wing. Everything is on schedule." "Good." He walked past her toward the front door. "I'm going into the city to pick up a distinct gift for Father. I'll be back an hour before the guests arrive. Do try to look presentable tonight. Wear that navy thing I bought you 3 years ago. It covers you up well enough." "Richard," she called out, before he reached the heavy oak door. "Your father asked if you'd have breakfast with him. He's in the solarium." Richard didn't even turn around. "Tell him I'm busy. I'm securing his future. He can eat his toast alone." The door slammed, the sound reverberating through the empty hall. Amelia let out a breath she felt she'd been holding since she woke up. She walked over to the window, watching Richard's Porsche 911 tear down the gravel driveway. He wasn't going to buy a gift. She knew that. The gift had been sitting in his office, safe for a week, a vintage Patek Philippe watch. She knew because she had ordered it, wrapped it, and written the card. He was going to see her. Amelia wasn't stupid. She had known about the affair for 6 months. The late nights, the smell of Santal 33 perfume on his shirts, a scent Amelia never wore, and the credit card charges at hotels in Manhattan. She knew her name was Tiffany Miller, Richard's executive consultant. 26 years old, ambitious, and stunningly beautiful in a way that made Amelia feel like a piece of worn-out furniture. Amelia turned away from the window and walked toward the back of the house, toward the solarium. The house was buzzing with hired staff, polishing silver and arranging tables, but Amelia felt entirely alone. She entered the solarium, a glass-walled room filled with tropical plants and the smell of damp earth. In the center, sitting in a wheelchair with a blanket over his knees, was Arthur Blackwood. Arthur was a lion of a man, even at 75, and battling the aftermath of a stroke. His hair was snow-white, his face lined with decades of hard decisions, but his eyes were sharp. He was staring out at the rose garden. "He left," Arthur rasped, not turning his head. Amelia walked over and poured him a cup of tea from the silver service on the table. "He had to go into the city, Arthur. Urgent business for the firm. He sends his apologies." Arthur scoffed, reaching for the cup with a trembling hand. "He sends his lies. The boy hasn't had an urgent business meeting on a Saturday in his life, unless it involved a skirt or a scotch." Amelia didn't answer. She sat opposite him, peeling an orange with practiced efficiency. She and Arthur had a strange, quiet alliance. When she had first married Richard, a girl from a middle-class family in Ohio with a nursing degree, the Blackwood social circle had eaten her alive. They called her a gold digger. But Arthur had watched her. He saw how she cared for Richard when he had the flu, how she managed the household accounts to save money even though they were rich, and later how she became Arthur's primary caregiver when the nurses annoyed him. "You look tired, Amelia," Arthur said, watching her hands. "Just prep, Arthur. Big night." "He treats you like an employee," Arthur grumbled. "Worse than an employee. I pay the employees." Amelia offered him a slice of orange. "He's stressed. He wants tonight to be perfect for you." Arthur took the orange, but didn't eat it immediately. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He wants tonight to be perfect for him. He thinks I'm going to announce his full succession tonight. He thinks I'm handing over the chairmanship and the deed to the estate." Amelia froze. That was exactly what Richard thought. It was all he had talked about for months. "Once the old man signs over the house, we can finally renovate this mausoleum," he had said. "Are you?" Amelia asked softly. Arthur smiled, a mischievous glint in his eye that reminded Amelia of why he had been such a terrifying businessman in his prime. "I'm going to announce the truth. The lawyers will be here at 8. Arthur, what are you planning?" He patted her hand. His skin was paper-thin and cold. "Justice, my dear, and perhaps a little bit of theatre. You've been the only real thing in this house for 10 years, Amelia. Tonight, I want you to remember that. No matter what Richard says, no matter who he brings, you hold your head up. Do you promise me?" "Who he brings?" Amelia asked, a knot forming in her stomach. "Who would he bring?" Arthur looked away, his expression darkening. "I have ears, Amelia. I may be stuck in this chair, but I am not deaf. I heard him on the phone yesterday. He's invited Miss Miller." The air left the room. Amelia felt the blood drain from her face. "He wouldn't. Not here. Not tonight. It's a family event." "He's arrogant," Arthur said, crushing the orange slice in his hand. "He thinks he's untouchable because he thinks I'm senile and you're weak. He is wrong on both counts." Amelia stood up, her hands shaking. I need to check on the linens." "Amelia," Arthur commanded. She stopped. "Wear the red dress." She looked back at him. "What? The red dress? The one you bought for the opera gala last year, that he told you was too loud, so you never wore it. Wear it." "I can't, Arthur. Richard told me to wear the navy. I'm the patriarch of this family, and it is my birthday." Arthur slammed his hand on the armrest. "If you respect me, you will wear the damn red dress. You are the lady of this house, not his shadow. Start dressing like it." Amelia looked at the old man, seeing the fierce protection in his eyes. For the first time all day, her shoulders dropped. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll wear the red dress." By 7 p.m., the driveway of the Blackwood estate looked like a luxury car dealership. Bentleys, Rolls-Royces, and Aston Martins lined the gravel loop. The air was thick with expensive perfume and the murmur of the East Coast elite. The grand hall was transformed. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above towering arrangements of white lilies. Richard hadn't noticed they weren't orchids, of course. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Waiters in white gloves moved like ghosts through the crowd, offering champagne and caviar. Amelia stood at the top of the staircase. She felt exposed. She was wearing the red dress. It was a floor-length silk gown, structured and elegant, with a neckline that was tasteful yet daring. It fit her perfectly. She had styled her hair up, revealing her neck, and wore a pair of diamond drop earrings that had belonged to her own grandmother. Not expensive, but sentimental. She took a deep breath and descended. Heads turned. At first, just a few. Then, ripples of silence spread through the room. People who usually looked right through Amelia, the bankers' wives, the country club presidents, stopped talking and stared. They weren't used to seeing Amelia Blackwood look powerful. Richard was at the bottom of the stairs, his back to her, holding court with a group of investors. He was laughing, a drink in hand. And that's why the market is shifting toward. Richard stopped as he saw the investors looking past him, their eyes widening. Richard turned around. When he saw Amelia, his smile vanished instantly, replaced by a flash of pure, unadulterated rage. He stepped forward to intercept her before she could reach the guests. "What do you think you're doing?" he hissed, grabbing her elbow, his grip tight enough to bruise. "I told you to wear the navy suit. You look like a showgirl." "I look like your wife," Amelia said, pulling her arm away. Her heart was hammering against her ribs, but Arthur's words echoed in her mind. "You are the lady of this house." "And Arthur asked me to wear this." "Arthur is losing his mind," Richard spat. "Go upstairs and change, now, before you embarrass me further." "No," she said. Richard blinked, stunned. "Excuse me?" I said no. "The guests are here. I am the hostess. I'm not going to leave them to go play dress-up, because you're insecure." Before Richard could respond, the heavy front doors swung open again. The chatter in the room didn't just quiet down. It stopped. Framed in the doorway was a woman who clearly intended to suck every ounce of oxygen out of the room. She was young, blonde, and devastatingly pretty. But it wasn't just her beauty that caused the silence. It was her dress. Tiffany Miller was wearing a white, beaded gown that looked suspiciously like a wedding dress. It was backless, tight, and trailed a 3-foot train behind her. It was a statement. It was a declaration of war. She stepped into the hall, her eyes scanning the room until they locked onto Richard. She smiled, a predatory, victorious smile. Richard's anger at Amelia evaporated, replaced by a flustered, sweaty panic that quickly morphed into a greasy charm. He abandoned Amelia and walked toward Tiffany. "Tiffany," Richard announced, his voice booming a little too loudly. "So glad you could make it. Everyone, this is Tiffany Miller, the brilliant consultant who helped us close the Tokyo deal." The room murmured. Everyone knew. In circles like this, secrets were currency, and everyone was rich. They knew exactly who she was. Tiffany didn't look at the crowd. She looked at Amelia. She glided across the floor, Richard trailing her like a puppy. She stopped in front of Amelia, looking her up and down. The contrast was striking. Amelia in regal, bold red. Tiffany in flashy, inappropriate white. "Amelia," Tiffany said, her voice sugary sweet, but loud enough for the nearby circle to hear. "Richard talks about you so much. He said you were homely. But that dress is certainly trying hard, isn't it?" Amelia stiffened. "Miss Miller, you're late, and you're wearing white to a birthday party. I assume you mistook the invitation for a bridal expo." A few guests stifled chuckles. Tiffany's smile faltered for a microsecond before hardening. "Oh, honey," Tiffany laughed, stepping closer and handing her sequined clutch bag to Amelia. "Here, be a dear and have someone put this in the coat check. And fetch me a vodka martini. Extra dry. I've had a long drive." She treated her like the help. In front of 50 of the most influential people in Connecticut, she had handed the wife her bag and ordered a drink. Richard stood there, watching. This was the moment. This was the moment a husband would step in, correct the mistake, and defend his wife's honor. Richard laughed. "Go on, Amelia," Richard said, waving his hand dismissively. "Take her bag, and make sure the bar knows Tiffany is VIP tonight. Whatever she wants, she gets." The humiliation hit Amelia like a physical blow. The heat rose in her cheeks. She looked at Richard, silently begging him to stop, to realize what he was doing. But he was looking at Tiffany with a hunger that made Amelia's stomach turn. Amelia held the clutch bag. It felt heavy, like a brick. She looked around the room. The guests were pretending to look away, but they were watching, judging, pitying. "I am not the coat check girl," Amelia said, her voice shaking slightly. She held the bag out, waiting for Tiffany to take it back. Tiffany didn't move her hands. She just smirked. "Well, you're certainly not the wife of the year, are you? Just take the bag, Amelia. Don't make a scene. It's Arthur's big night." "Yes," Richard snapped. "Amelia, stop being difficult. Take the bag." "I'll take it." A deep, booming voice resonated from the corridor. The crowd parted. Arthur Blackwood was being wheeled into the room by his nurse. He looked majestic in his tuxedo, despite the wheelchair. His face was like granite. He rolled up to the trio. He looked at Richard with disdain, then at Tiffany with cold amusement, and finally at Amelia with pride. "I'll take the bag," Arthur repeated. He reached out, snatched the sequined clutch from Amelia's hand, and without breaking eye contact with Tiffany, dropped it onto the floor. Thump. "Oops," Arthur deadpanned. "My grip isn't what it used to be." Tiffany's jaw dropped. "That's a Prada." "I don't care if it's the Holy Grail," Arthur interrupted. "You are in my house, young woman, and in my house you do not mistake the lady of the manor for a servant. If you want a drink, the bar is over there. If you want to hang your coat, the closet is by the door. If you want to insult my daughter-in-law, the exit is behind you." The silence in the room was absolute. Richard stepped forward, his face red. "Father, that is uncalled for. Tiffany is a guest. She's important to the company." "Is she?" Arthur raised an eyebrow. "We'll see how important she is when the lawyers arrive. Now get out of my way, Richard. I want to dance with my date." Arthur held out a hand to Amelia. "Amelia, would you do an old man the honor of wheeling him to the center of the room?" Amelia looked at Richard's furious face, then at Tiffany's shocked expression. She smiled, a genuine, warm smile. She stepped over the Prada bag on the floor. "I would love to, Arthur," she said. She took the handles of the wheelchair and guided him into the crowd, leaving Richard and his mistress standing alone in the foyer, the whispers of the guests rising around them like a tide. But Amelia knew this wasn't the end. She saw the look in Tiffany's eyes as they walked away. It was the look of someone who wasn't used to losing. And Richard looked like a man who was about to do something desperate. The night had only just begun. 3 miles away from the Omnicorp Tower, the atmosphere was drastically different. Amelia sat in the corner booth of the Kettle and Quill, a small, dusty bookstore cafe in Bloomsbury that smelled of old paper and roasted hazelnut. It was the kind of place where time seemed to slow down, insulated from the frenetic energy of the financial district by walls lined with centuries of literature. She ordered an Earl Grey tea. When the waitress, a young girl named Chloe with bright pink hair, brought it over, her hand shook slightly as she placed the cup down. "Sorry," Chloe muttered, glancing at the television mounted above the counter. "Everyone's a bit on edge. Have you seen the news?" Amelia blew gently on the steam rising from her cup. "I've been disconnected for a bit. What's happening?" Chloe pointed the remote at the screen and turned the volume up. "Breaking news. The London Stock Exchange has suspended trading on Omnicorp shares after a catastrophic collapse in value. Reports are flooding in of supply chain paralyzed across the globe. We are receiving images now from the port of Los Angeles." The screen cut to a helicopter shot of the massive port. It was usually a ballet of movement, cranes lifting containers, trucks weaving through lanes. Now it was a parking lot. Thousands of trucks sat idle. Massive container ships drifted aimlessly just outside the harbor, their engines silent. The automated docking system, known as Nexus, has apparently ceased communication with the Port Authority, the news anchor said, pressing a hand to her earpiece. "We are hearing rumors of a cyber attack, though no group has claimed responsibility. Omnicorp CEO Robert Sterling has yet to make a statement." Amelia took a sip of her tea. It was hot, floral, and perfect. She opened her bag and pulled out a paperback novel, The Count of Monte Cristo. She had bought it 3 years ago, but never had the time to read it. Robert had called her on Christmas Eve that year, demanding she fix a server glitch in the Singapore hub. She had spent the holiday in the server room, eating vending machine crackers while Robert skied in Aspen. She turned to page 1. The bell above the cafe door jingled. The wind from the street blew in, carrying the scent of rain and ozone. A man stepped inside. He didn't look like the usual clientele of students and retired professors. He wore a trench coat that cost more than the bookstore's entire inventory, and his shoes were Italian leather, currently being ruined by the London puddles. He scanned the room with predatory precision. His eyes landed on Amelia. Amelia didn't look up from her book, but she knew he was there. She sensed the shift in the air pressure. The man walked over and slid into the booth opposite her without asking. He placed a wet umbrella on the floor. "Hello, Amelia," the man said. His voice was smooth, like gravel wrapped in silk. Amelia turned a page. "Hello, Silas. Silas Mercer, the CEO of Ethelgard Logistics, Omnicorp's only serious rival, where Robert Sterling was a sledgehammer, loud, brash, and destructive. Silas was a scalpel. He was older, perhaps 60, with steel-grey hair and a face that revealed nothing. "I expected you to be on a plane," Silas said, signaling Chloe for a black coffee. "The Caymans. Maybe Switzerland." "Why would I run?" Amelia asked, finally looking up. Her eyes were clear. "I haven't done anything wrong. I was terminated. I left the building. I'm just enjoying my unemployment." Silas chuckled softly. "You stopped the world, Amelia. That's not unemployment. That's godhood." "I didn't stop anything," she corrected him gently. "I built a car that requires a driver. Robert fired the driver. Now he's surprised the car won't move. Silas leaned in, resting his elbows on the scarred wooden table. Robert is a fool. We both know that. He sees code as plumbing, pipes and valves. He doesn't understand that Nexus isn't just a program. It's a neural net. It learns, it bonds, it imprinted on you. You seem to know a lot about my architecture, Silas. I've been trying to hire you for 5 years, he reminded her. You never returned my calls. I was loyal. And look where that got you. Silas gestured to the TV screen, where a reporter was now standing in front of a grocery store with empty shelves. Panic buying has started. The just-in-time delivery systems are offline. Fresh produce will rot in the trucks within 24 hours. Pharmaceuticals, insulin, antibiotics. They are stuck in climate-controlled containers that are currently losing power. Amelia's expression tightened slightly. The chaos she expected, the danger to innocence. That was the variable she had to control. Robert can turn the power back on manually, Amelia said. He has the fail-safe keys. He doesn't, Silas said. I have a source in his IT department. Kevin? Nice kid, very chatty when he's panicked. He says the fail-safes are encrypted with a biometric hash. Your biometric hash. Silas reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a checkbook. He placed it on the table. He didn't write a number. He just signed it. Name your price, Amelia. Come to Ethelgard. I have a team of 60 engineers waiting for your command. We can patch the Nexus protocol into our servers. We can save the supply chain. You'll be CTO. You'll have equity. You'll have Robert Sterling's head on a platter, and you'll be the hero who saved the world from his incompetence. It was a seductive offer. It was everything she had wanted an hour ago. Respect, power, revenge. Amelia looked at the blank check. Then she looked at the TV. The ticker-tape news was now reporting that the Mayor of London was calling an emergency meeting. You think this is about money? Amelia said softly. Everything is about money, Silas replied. Or power, which is just money with a different haircut. No, Amelia said. She closed her book. Robert fired me because he thought I was interchangeable. He thought the human element didn't matter. If I just sell the code to you, I'm proving him right, that I'm just a vendor, just a cog. Then what do you want? Silas asked, his eyes narrowing. I want them to understand, Amelia said. I want them to realize that you cannot build an empire on the backs of people you despise, and then expect the foundation to hold when you kick them away. She slid the blank check back across the table. I'm not coming to work for you, Silas. Not today. Silas stared at her for a long moment. He respected her. She could see that. But he also thought she was crazy. Robert will come for you, Silas warned, pocketing the check. He's a cornered animal, and he has friends in low places. If you won't take my protection— I don't need protection, Amelia said, picking up her tea. I have the key. Back in the Omnicorp boardroom, the veneer of civilization had completely evaporated. It had been only 2 hours, but the room smelled of sour sweat and fear. The pristine mahogany table was cluttered with empty water bottles, crumpled papers, and 3 different laptops that were all displaying various access-denied screens. Robert Sterling had stripped off his suit jacket. His tie was on the floor. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, revealing a neck flushed red with rage. "Get me Commissioner O'Malley again," Robert roared at Alistair. "He's not taking your calls, Robert," Alistair shouted back, losing his composure for the first time in 20 years. "I've called his private line 4 times. His secretary says he's in a meeting with the Prime Minister. You know what that means? It means we are radioactive." Robert kicked a wastebasket across the room. It slammed into the wall with a deafening clang. James Harrington, the CFO, was sitting on the floor, weeping. He had his iPad in his lap. "The stock is down 40%. The margin calls are coming in, Robert. The banks are calling the loans. If we don't get the ships moving by market close, Omnicorp is insolvent. We'll be bankrupt by morning." "We are not going bankrupt," Robert screamed. He turned to Kevin, the young IT director, who looked like he was about to pass out. Kevin was typing furiously on a terminal, his fingers a blur. "Kevin, tell me you have something. Tell me you've hacked it." I think I found the deadlock," Kevin stammered. "The system is looking for the heartbeat signal." "What the hell is a heartbeat signal?" "It's a liveness check," Kevin explained, his voice cracking. "Amelia, Ms. Jenkins, she programmed the Nexus to ping her personal device every 60 minutes. If it doesn't receive a specific encrypted response, it assumes the architect is under duress or dead. It initiates a scorched earth protocol to prevent the tech from being stolen." "She's holding a gun to our heads with a damn pager," Robert whispered, horrified. "It's not just that," Kevin continued. "I've been looking at the logs, the contract, the one you cited to fire her. I found a digital copy she uploaded to the server years ago." "So what?" Alistair snapped. "It's a standard IP contract." "Not exactly," Kevin said. "Look at the metadata on the timestamp of the upload. She amended the terms of the Project Nexus addendum 3 years ago. You guys signed it digitally during the merger flurry." Robert froze. "What are you saying?" "Clause 14, Section B was amended," Kevin read from the screen. It says, "While Omnicorp retains ownership of the hardware, the cognitive architecture known as Nexus remains the intellectual property of the creator until such time as the creator is appointed to the executive board. In the event of termination, without cause prior to this appointment, the license to use Nexus is immediately revoked." The room went dead silent. The only sound was the rain lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows. Alistair Caldwell walked over to the laptop. He read the text. He read it again. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "Is it legally binding?" Robert asked, his voice trembling. It's ironclad," Alistair whispered. "You signed it, Robert. I signed it. We all just clicked approve all during the Blackwell acquisition because we were too busy counting our bonuses. We didn't read the attachments." Robert sank into his chair. He felt like he had been punched in the gut. "So," Robert said, his voice hollow, "she didn't steal the company. We don't own it. We never did. We've been renting it from her. And we just evicted the landlord," James whimpered from the floor. Robert stared at the black screen of his phone. He realized now why the police weren't coming. He realized why the lawyers couldn't help. Amelia Jenkins hadn't committed a crime. She had simply enforced a contract that they were too arrogant to read. "Where is she?" Robert asked. It wasn't a scream anymore. It was a plea. "Security footage tracked her leaving the building," Alistair said. "She walked north. There's a credit card hit at a bookstore cafe in Bloomsbury about 20 minutes ago." "The Kettle and Quill." Robert stood up. He buttoned his shirt. He grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair. "Call the driver," Robert said. "The driver left, sir," Kevin noted. "He said he wasn't going to wait around for a company that can't pay his overtime." "Then I'll drive myself," Robert snarled. "Alistair, you're coming with me. James, stay here and try to keep the creditors from seizing the furniture." "What are you going to do?" Alistair asked, hurrying after him. "I'm going to do the only thing we can do," Robert said, as he marched toward the elevators, stepping over the debris of his shattered reputation. "I'm going to beg." The drive to Bloomsbury was a nightmare. London traffic was gridlocked because the traffic light synchronization system, also managed by a subsidiary of Omnicorp, had defaulted to a flashing red safety mode. Robert Sterling, a man who hadn't driven a car in 10 years, was behind the wheel of Alistair's Mercedes. He honked the horn incessantly, sweating profusely. "Watch out!" Alistair yelled, as Robert swerved to avoid a stalled delivery truck. "I see it!" Robert shouted. By the time they reached the street of the cafe, it was dark. The streetlights reflected off the wet pavement. Robert parked the car illegally on the curb, not caring about the ticket. He ran through the rain, his expensive Italian loafers splashing in the gutter. He reached the door of the Kettle and Quill and threw it open. The bell jingled cheerfully, a mocking contrast to his desperation. The cafe was warm and quiet. A few patrons looked up, annoyed by the intrusion of this wet, frantic man in a disheveled suit. Robert scanned the room. He saw the empty tables. He saw the waitress wiping down the counter. He rushed over to the booth in the corner. It was empty. On the table, there was an empty teacup, a £5 note for a tip, and a paperback copy of The Count of Monte Cristo. And there was a note, written on a napkin in neat, cursive handwriting. Robert picked it up, his hands shaking so hard he could barely read it. "Robert, I saw you pull up. You're driving aggressively. You should be careful. The traffic lights aren't reliable today. I'm not here. I'm gone, and I'm not turning the key back on. You have 12 hours before the cooling systems in the medical transport trucks fail. I don't want people to get hurt. So here is my offer. Resign, all of you. You, James, Alistair, the entire board. Resign publicly. Forfeit your severance packages. Hand over control of the board to a transition team of my choosing. Do it by midnight, or the Nexus deletes itself. Permanently. Tick-tock." Amelia Robert crushed the napkin in his fist. He looked out the window into the dark, rainy street. She was out there somewhere. She was watching him. The return journey to the Omnicorp Tower was a descent into hell. The rain had intensified, turning the streets of London into slick black rivers reflecting the flashing blue lights of emergency vehicles. When Robert Sterling and Alistair Caldwell finally pulled up to the skyscraper, they weren't met by valets or security guards. They were met by a mob. News of the medical supply crisis had leaked. It wasn't just about delayed Amazon packages anymore. Rumors were swirling on Twitter and WhatsApp that insulin shipments were grounded, that organ transplant couriers were stuck in traffic jams caused by the Nexus blackout. Panic had a flavor, and tonight it tasted like copper and smoke. "Drive through them," Robert screamed, pounding the dashboard. "I can't, Robert. There are people everywhere," Alistair yelled back, his usually composed lawyer's face pale and sweating. A protester's sign slammed against the passenger window. "People over profits." A fist thumped the hood. Security guards eventually managed to carve a wedge through the crowd, ushering the two men into the lobby. The marble sanctuary of the Omnicorp lobby, usually a cathedral of silence, was now a makeshift triage center for the company's bleeding reputation. PR reps were shouting into phones. Legal aides were running with boxes of files, and the smell of fear was more potent than the expensive diffusers that usually scented the air with white tea. They took the private elevator to the 42nd floor. The silence inside the metal box was heavy, pressurized. "She's bluffing," Robert said, staring at his reflection in the brushed steel doors. He looked older than he had that morning. The lines around his eyes had deepened into trenches. "She won't let people die. She's too soft. That's always been her problem. She cares too much." Alistair didn't look at him. "She wrote a kill switch into the kernel, Robert. That's not soft. That's premeditated homicide of a corporation. You need to understand the legal exposure here. If those cooling units fail at midnight, we aren't looking at bankruptcy. We are looking at negligent manslaughter charges. The Crown Prosecution Service will have a field day." The elevator dinged. The boardroom was a ruin. The darkness was broken only by the eerie glow of battery-powered emergency lanterns. James Harrington, the CFO, was no longer sitting on the floor. He was standing by the window, staring down at the ants warring in the street below. He held a tumbler of scotch that was filled to the brim. "You didn't find her," James stated flatly. He didn't turn around. "She left a note," Robert said, throwing his wet jacket onto the table. "She wants us to resign. All of us. Unconditional surrender." James turned. His eyes were red-rimmed. "Then we do it." "We do not do it." Robert slammed his fist on the table. "I built this company from a logistics firm in a warehouse to a global superpower. I am not handing the keys over to a glorified secretary because she's having a tantrum. She has us by the throat, Robert," James shouted, spilling his drink. "I just got off the phone with the Minister of Health. He gave us until midnight. If the medical grid isn't back online, they are freezing our personal assets. Not the company accounts, our accounts, my house, my offshore holdings, everything." "We can fight the government," Alistair interjected, his lawyer brain trying to find purchase on a slippery slope. "Injunctions, stays of execution. We can tie this up in court for years." "We don't have years!" James threw the glass. It shattered against the wall near Robert's head. "We have," he checked his Rolex, 2 hours and 14 minutes. Robert walked over to the head of the table. He sat in his chair. He placed his hands flat on the mahogany. He closed his eyes. "We changed the narrative," Robert whispered. The other two looked at him. "What?" "We don't resign," Robert said, opening his eyes. They were cold, hard flint. "We go on the offensive. We go on air. CNN, BBC, Sky. We tell the world that we are under attack by a cyber terrorist. We name Amelia Jenkins. We release her photo. We tell the world that a disgruntled ex-employee has hijacked critical medical supplies and is holding the world hostage for a ransom." Alistair's eyes widened. "Robert, that's defamation. If we lie—" "It's not a lie if we frame it right," Robert said, his voice gaining strength. "She is holding the system hostage. We paint her as a monster. We turn the mob outside against her. If she's a public enemy, she can't negotiate. She'll have to turn the system back on to save her own life." "It's a high-stakes gamble," Alistair murmured, seeing the logic. "If the public thinks she's a terrorist, the government will authorize GCHQ to hunt her down. She'll be forced to surrender the key." "And if she fights back?" James asked nervously. "She can't fight back," Robert sneered. "She's one woman with a pager. We are Omnicorp. We own the media. We own the narrative." Robert stood up, buttoning his wet shirt. "Get the PR team. Set up a live stream. I'm going to address the world." Amelia Jenkins was not in a hole. She was not hiding in a sewer or a basement. She was sitting in a comfortable armchair in room 404 of the St. Pancras Renaissance Hotel. It was a beautiful room with high ceilings and a view of the station. She had ordered room service, a club sandwich and a pot of coffee, but she hadn't touched it. On the desk in front of her, 3 laptops were open. The first laptop displayed the Nexus system status. The red warning lights were blinking faster now. System critical. Coolant failure in 118 minutes. The second laptop was a secure, encrypted line connected to Silas Mercer. He wasn't speaking, just waiting on the other end, ready to provide the server capacity she would need if she decided to migrate the system. The third laptop was streaming the BBC News channel. "We are cutting live to Omnicorp headquarters," the news anchor announced, her face grave. "CEO Robert Sterling is expected to make a statement regarding the global logistics blackout." Amelia leaned forward. She watched as Robert walked up to a podium that had been hastily set up in the lobby of the tower. He looked disheveled, but defiant. He looked like a general rallying his troops. "Citizens of the world," Robert began, his voice booming with practiced gravitas. "Tonight we face a crisis. But this crisis is not due to a malfunction. It is not an error. It is an act of terror." Amelia watched, her face impassive. "A former employee," Robert continued, holding up a picture of Amelia, her ID badge photo, where she looked tired and caught off guard. "Amelia Jenkins. She was terminated this morning for gross incompetence and theft of company data. In retaliation, she has deployed a logic bomb that has paralyzed our medical supply lines." He paused for effect. "She is demanding money. She is demanding power, and she is willing to let the sick and vulnerable suffer to get it. We are working with the authorities to apprehend this criminal. But I say this to Amelia Jenkins. Turn the system back on. Do not let innocent blood be on your hands." On the encrypted line, Silas Mercer's voice crackled through the speakers. "He's good, Amelia. I'll give him that. He just put a target on your back. Twitter is already trending, find Amelia Jenkins. People are angry. They're scared." Amelia didn't reply. She just typed a few lines of code into the first laptop. "He forgot one thing," Amelia whispered to the empty room. "What's that?" Silas asked. "He forgot that Nexus records audio in the boardroom," she said. "It's a feature I added for automated meeting minutes. It captures everything. Even when the official system is off, the microphones are always listening for voice commands." Amelia opened a file named Termination, log RSIL11 1423.wafet. She looked at the waveform. She could see the spikes in the audio where they had laughed, the jagged, ugly peaks of their amusement. "Silas," Amelia said, "do you have contacts at the BBC?" "I own a 15% stake in the parent company," Silas replied. "Why? I'm sending you a file. I want you to play it, unedited, immediately." "Amelia, if you release this, there's no going back. This is nuclear." "He called me a terrorist," Amelia said, her voice cold. "He wants a war? I'll give him the truth. The truth is the most destructive weapon he's ever seen." She hit send. Back in the Omnicorp lobby, Robert was fielding questions from the press. He was winning. He could feel it. The reporters were scribbling furiously, buying the story of the rogue employee. He felt the rush of adrenaline. He was going to survive this. He was going to win. Suddenly, the large monitors in the lobby, which were broadcasting the news feed, flickered. The BBC anchor on the screen pressed her hand to her ear, her face going pale. "Apologies to Mr. Sterling," the anchor said, her voice shaking. "We have just received an audio recording, verified by digital timestamp, from the Omnicorp boardroom. It was recorded this morning at 9:00 a.m. Robert froze. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse standing upright. "Cut the feed!" Alistair screamed from the sidelines. "Cut it!" But it was too late. The audio began to play over the massive speakers in the lobby, and simultaneously on millions of televisions and phones around the world. "I'm waiting, Amelia. We all are." Robert's voice, dripping with arrogance. "I built the core. Without the Nexus code, the automated shipping lanes don't work. I'm asking for the contract you signed." Amelia's voice, calm, reasonable. Then came the laughter. It echoed through the lobby. The cruel, baying laughter of 12 wealthy men mocking a woman who was asking for her due. Then Alistair's voice. Clause 14. The promise of promotion was contingent on a board vote. We voted 10 minutes before you walked in. Then Robert's voice again, clearer than anything. "You were a useful tool, Amelia. But tools belong in the shed. If you're not out of the building in 15 minutes, I'll have you escorted out by the police." And finally, the kicker. The smoking gun. She was good. But she was getting too much leverage. She knew where all the bodies were buried. The audio cut out. The silence in the lobby was absolute. Every reporter, every cameraman, every protester who had snuck in, they were all staring at Robert Sterling. He wasn't the victim anymore. He wasn't the captain of industry fighting a terrorist. He was a bully, a liar, a thief who had stolen a woman's life work and laughed about it, and was now willing to let the world burn to cover his tracks. A reporter from The Guardian stepped forward. He didn't ask a question. He made a statement. "Mr. Sterling," the reporter said, "it sounds like you fired the only person who knows how to fly the plane while the plane was in the air, and you did it for fun." Robert opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His phone buzzed. It was James Harrington. Robert looked at Alistair. Alistair was already backing away, retreating into the shadows of the hallway, typing furiously on his phone, likely calling his own defense attorney. Robert looked at the screen. The Chiron had changed. Istand with Shara, trending worldwide. Omnicorp board caught on tape. The clock struck 11 p.m. 1 hour left. Robert's knees gave out. He gripped the podium to stop himself from collapsing. The flashbulbs were blinding him now, aggressive and relentless. His phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. Resignation. Public. Now. Or the next file I release is the creative accounting folder from the Cayman server. S. Robert stared at the phone. He looked at the cameras. He looked at the ruin of his empire. He realized then that the laughter had stopped hours ago. He just hadn't been listening. The silence in the Omnicorp lobby was heavier than the laughter had ever been. Robert Sterling stood at the podium, the bright lights of the cameras illuminating the sweat that trickled down his temple. He looked at the text message on his phone one last time. He looked at Alistair, who gave a barely perceptible nod, a silent signal that the war was over. Robert leaned into the microphone. His voice, usually booming, was a rasp. "Effective immediately," Robert said, fighting the tremor in his jaw. "I am resigning as CEO of Omnicorp. The board of directors, the entire board, will be stepping down pending an internal investigation." He swallowed hard. "We acknowledge that the intellectual property rights to the Nexus Protocol belong to its creator. We have formally requested that she restore functionality to the global grid." He didn't wait for questions. He turned and walked away from the podium, disappearing into the shadows of the corridor, a king fleeing his own castle. In room 404 of the St. Pancras Renaissance, Amelia watched the screen. She didn't smile. She didn't cheer. She simply felt the quiet satisfaction of a chaotic equation finally balancing out. She pulled the old pager from her pocket. She typed in a single command. "Run Dawn, Protocol, X." She pressed enter. Across the city, and then across the world, the change was instantaneous. In the Omnicorp control room, the sea of red lights on the wall-sized map flickered once, then turned a soothing, steady green. At the port of Los Angeles, the massive cranes roared to life. In the middle of the Atlantic, ship engines rumbled, the vibrations shaking the decks as they corrected their courses. The cooling units in the medical trucks hummed back to full power, saving thousands of liters of life-saving medicine. The world began to move again. 6 months later, the rain had cleared over London. It was a crisp, bright spring morning. Amelia walked into the glass-walled conference room of Phoenix Systems, a boutique logistics firm in Shoreditch. She wasn't wearing a grey cardigan. She was wearing a tailored navy blazer, sharp and professional. At the head of the table sat Silas Mercer, but he wasn't her boss. He was her partner. "The quarterly projections are in," Silas said, smiling as she entered. "Efficiency is up 12% since we integrated your new ethical tracking module, And we just poached Omnicorp's last 3 major clients." "Omnicorp?" Amelia asked, raising an eyebrow as she poured herself a coffee. "I thought they liquidated last month." "They did," Silas chuckled. "The brand is dead. Robert Sterling's trial starts on Tuesday. Fraud, embezzlement, and reckless endangerment. They say he'll get 10 years. Amelia walked to the window. She looked out at the London skyline. She could see the old Omnicorp tower in the distance. It was being rebranded. The massive O was being dismantled by cranes. She took a sip of her coffee. She remembered the laughter. It felt like a distant memory now, a bad song she had forgotten the tune to. "Are you ready for the board meeting?" Silas asked. "Everyone is waiting for you. They want to hear the CTO's vision for the next year." Amelia turned around. She looked at the team of young engineers and seasoned strategists sitting around the table. They weren't looking at her with disdain. They were looking at her with respect. They had their pens ready. They were listening. "I'm ready," Amelia said, taking her seat at the head of the table. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to threaten. When the architect speaks, the world listens. Robert Sterling made a mistake that too many powerful people make. He confused silence with weakness. He looked at Amelia Jenkins and saw a line item on a budget sheet, a tool to be used and discarded. He didn't realize that the people who quietly build the world are the only ones who know how to take it apart. Amelia's story is a reminder that competence is the ultimate leverage. You don't need to be the loudest person in the room to be the most powerful. You just need to hold the keys. When they laughed at her, they sealed their fate. Because while they were busy celebrating their own egos, she was rewriting the rules of the game. What did you think of Amelia's revenge? Was she right to hold the system hostage, or did she go too far? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you've ever been underestimated, mocked, or undervalued at your job, hit that like button. Let's show the world that there are millions of Amelias out there who deserve respect. And if you want more stories of sweet revenge, corporate downfalls, and underdogs taking back their power, make sure you subscribe and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss the next story. Thanks for watching, and remember, be careful who you laugh at.